Hey everyone, welcome back. Let's dive into some fascinating research today about Cuban youth and their relationship with technology. We often hear about Cuba's vintage cars and kind of limited internet access, right? But the story of how younger generations are navigating the digital world there, it's way more complex than that. So let's unpack it.
Yeah, and what's super interesting is to really get this generation's relationship with technology, we need to understand the foundation they're building from. And for Cuba, that foundation is education.
That's right. One of the documents you sent over about Cuba's social and economic policies really highlights that emphasis on education. It's impressive. Imagine, like, a system where the average person has almost completed 11th grade. That's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it's a deliberate strategy, and it goes way back to the revolution. Basically, the Cuban government really prioritized creating a highly skilled workforce from early on.
And they put their money where their mouth is, too, right? Free education at all levels, even materials are covered. Plus, there's boarding and scholarships available. They even have a program specifically to help young people who left school early to re-enter the education system.
Exactly. That's the Curso de Superación Integral. And I think that speaks volumes about their commitment to making sure everyone has the chance to develop valuable skills.
Yeah, it's definitely a stark contrast to what we see in a lot of other countries, that's for sure. They're very intentionally aligning these educational opportunities with, social and economic needs, and that ties directly into their employment policies, too. The goal is full employment, job security, fair wages.
Absolutely. And it all kind of feeds into this idea of really equipping their workforce for a modernizing economy. And of course, tourism is a huge part of that economy. But even that sector is more complex than it might seem from the outside.
Okay, so speaking of tourism, I was really fascinated by the system they have called the hold on, I've got it written down here somewhere. Ah, yes. The Clasificación Estándar de Actividades Turísticas, or CSET. It's basically this system that tracks every single thing related to their tourism industry. Hotels, restaurants, even cultural experiences are all categorized and tracked.
Yeah, it shows how seriously they take sustainable tourism. They're all about collecting data on every aspect of the industry, making sure that the economic growth from tourism doesn't harm their environment or their unique culture.
It's a delicate balance, for sure, attracting investment and developing infrastructure while still preserving what makes Cuba unique, especially with what your research called the new tourist travelers who are looking for these authentic, off-the-beaten-path experiences. Sounds a lot like you.
That's a great point. And this new wave of tourism really demands a highly skilled workforce, too. Think about it. Everything from hospitality management to language interpretation, even just like crafting those unique experiences, it all requires specialized training. Which brings us right back to their investment in education, right?
It's all connected. So we've got this strong foundation in education, a really deliberate approach to tourism. But then we bring in the digital world and things get really interesting. Two of the sources you shared of a research paper and then an article on Cuban youth and technology, they paint this really intriguing paradox.
It is fascinating, right? Because on the one hand, Cuba faces these significant technological limitations,
Yeah.
like internet access is limited, certain websites are restricted. But even with all that, young Cubans are incredibly adept at navigating the digital world.
Yeah, they've grown up having to be resourceful, finding creative workarounds and solutions to access information and connect with each other.
Right. And that's where we see things like El Paquete emerging, that informal market for digital content. People share, like everything from movies and TV shows to news articles to those external hard drives and flash drives. It really speaks to their resilience and their drive to connect with the world, even within a restricted environment.
It's amazing. So they're digitally savvy, entrepreneurial even. And it's interesting because it often exists in contrast to Cuba's more traditional economic structures. Like it makes you wonder, how do these digitally adept young people operate within a system that's still largely cash-based and state-controlled?
It definitely creates this fascinating tension, and we saw that tension come to a head in 2021 with the 11J protests, which we should definitely discuss more in a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. The 11J protests, yeah, that does feel like a really crucial turning point when we're trying to understand, like, how Cuban youth actually engage with technology, not just use it. Your article about the protests really highlighted how these demonstrations weren't only about economic hardship, but about, like, access to information and having your voice heard.
Exactly. And what's really significant is it was kind of a watershed moment for how technology could be used for social mobilization in Cuba.
Yeah.
This is the first time we saw social media used so widely to like actually organize demonstrations,
Mhm.
to share information in real time, even to broadcast events to the world, kind of like circumventing that state-controlled media.
Right. And then the government's response was very telling: internet shutdowns.
Yeah, it really revealed their concern about the potential of these technologies.
For sure, it wasn't just about controlling the narrative anymore. It was about trying to regain control of this space where information suddenly could flow so much more freely.
Definitely.
It makes you think about that whole debate around censorship in Cuba. Your sources painted like a really complicated picture. On the one hand, you've got the government actively censoring certain websites and content, stuff that's critical of the regime.
Right. And then on top of that, they've implemented this whole dual internet system. You have this more open global internet, but it's expensive. And then there's the restricted, cheaper national internet. So it creates like this unavoidable digital divide within the country.
It's true. You've got some people, often the younger generations, who can afford that access to the global internet, and they kind of have a wider window to the world, while others are pretty much limited to whatever information is available on the national internet. It's like this microcosm of these broader societal tensions at play.
It really is. But the thing is, and this is what I find so interesting, despite these limitations, despite the censorship, the digital divide,
Hmm.
you still see this incredible resilience and this desire to connect among these young Cubans. They're finding workarounds, building communities, sharing information through those informal networks, like we talked about with El Paquete.
And that whole idea of El Paquete as this, form of resistance is fascinating to me because it's not just about entertainment, it's so much more than that. It's access to information, to alternative viewpoints, and this sense of connection to a global community. It really speaks to their, ingenuity and determination to carve out their own space for expression.
Yeah, and it brings up all these questions about how technology will continue to shape these young Cubans' lives and how they, in turn, might end up shaping technology not just in Cuba, but globally.
It really makes you think about the long-term impacts of all this, you know?
Yeah.
We talk about how technology shapes these young people's lives, but then I don't know, it almost feels reversed sometimes. Like how might they end up shaping technology in the future?
Oh, that's such a good question. I mean, think about it. They've had to become so resourceful just to navigate a tech world with like limited resources, limited access. That kind of experience could lead to some really incredible innovations down the line. And those innovations might focus on affordability, you know,
Yeah.
accessibility, basically making technology actually work for more people, not just those who can afford it right now.
Totally. It makes you wonder if these experiences could even spark, I don't know, a whole new wave of technology. Tech that's focused on sustainability and equitable access from the start. Be like a digital version of El Paquete, almost finding creative solutions when you're working within these constraints.
Exactly. And you can't forget about their understanding of community and collaboration. They've had to rely on each other for information and support for so long, you know?
Mhm.
I think that could lead to some really cool platforms, things we haven't even imagined yet. Platforms that really prioritize like genuine connection and sharing knowledge in new ways.
That's fascinating. But it really feels like we're at this crucial point now. So how do we make sure that these voices, these experiences, not just in Cuba, but in other places with these kinds of limitations, how do we make sure they're heard? That they actually get to shape the future of tech?
It's a huge challenge,
Yeah.
but it's also a huge opportunity. This generation, they're the ones who are going to inherit this digital world,
Mm.
right? So they deserve a say in how it's designed, how it's governed, how it's used. We need to be creating spaces where their creativity and resilience can actually flourish.
I mean, imagine the potential. We're talking about a generation that has grown up navigating these complex systems, right? Adapting to limited resources, coming up with such creative solutions to challenges. That ingenuity, that's what we need to be tapping into to tackle these big issues facing the world today.
100%. And this whole deep dive into your research, it's shown us that there's just so much we can learn from these young Cubans. I mean, they're not just passively consuming technology, they're actively shaping their digital world, even with all these limitations they're facing, you know.
Hmm.
It reminds us that innovation can come from anywhere, and that resilience, creativity, that very human need to connect it, can overcome so many obstacles.
It's inspiring. So, as you continue exploring this topic, I want you to keep thinking about those broader implications, okay? How do we support a more inclusive future, a more equitable future, a more sustainable digital future for everyone? How can we make sure that young people are the architects of technology, not just the users? I have a feeling you're going to find some amazing answers along the way. I can't wait to hear what you discover.